Hey guys, tonight we journey into a world you think you know. But trust me, you don't. We've all seen the fairy tales, the shining towers, the flowing gowns, the delicate hands folded over silk cushions. We imagine royal life in the Middle Ages as a kind of Instagram fantasy, filtered through a soft lens of chivalry and charm. But here's the truth. Behind the cold stone walls of those famous castles, life for a medieval princess was far less enchanted and far more itchy. So before we crack open the gates of fantasy and step into the very real daily discomfort of medieval nobility, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a quick comment below and let me know what time it is where you're watching from. It's always wild to see who's tuning in from across the globe. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft, humming background noise. Wrap yourself in something warm and soft, because trust me, what you're about to hear is anything but. Tonight's journey. What life was really like in a medieval princess's castle. Forget the tiaras and happily ever afters. This isn't Disney's version of royalty. This is the real deal, where you, a young noblewoman of the blood, wake up not in a canopy of roses, but under a ceiling crawling with spiders and the faint smell of chamber pot. Over the next couple of hours, we'll walk, slowly and sleepily, through a full day in the life of a medieval princess. From the moment you wake up to the sour taste of yesterday's wine, all the way through the rituals, routines, and quiet miseries of castle life, all the way to nightfall, when the corridors whisper with shadows and a single candle could cost more than your favorite servant's annual wages. We'll explore what it meant to be a symbol, a tool for diplomacy, a vessel for heirs, a walking embodiment of your family's ambition. You'll see the world not through stained glass fantasy, but through drafty windows, cracked mirrors, and the ache of centuries-old responsibility resting on your silk-covered shoulders. Because the castle may be large, but your world inside it is very, very small. And tonight, you don't get to watch from the outside. You don't get to observe from a safe, modern distance. Tonight, you're her, the princess, daughter of kings, pinned in satin, prayed over daily, and expected to smile through all of it. So, no magic, no unicorns, no charming thieves climbing your balcony, just you, the weight of your title, and the reality of living inside stone walls that never forget who you are or who you're expected to become. Now close your eyes, take a deep breath, and prepare yourself, because this isn't a bedtime story. This is history. You wake slowly, not from the comfort of soft memory foam or beneath the gentle buzz of a morning alarm, but to the sound of clanking metal echoing faintly down a corridor, and the low, gravelly groan of wooden beams adjusting under centuries of pressure. It's cold. The kind of cold that seeps not just into your bones, but into your breath. The air in your chamber is damp, thick with the chill of early morning stone, and faintly tinged with the musty scent of old tapestries and extinguished candle wax. You're not in a warm palace or a delicate floral boudoir. You're in a fortress, a castle, built not for comfort but for survival. Your bed is massive, but not in the modern, luxurious sense. It's tall, so tall you need a footstool to climb in and out, and enclosed on all sides with heavy drapes made from faded damask and velvet. The fabric smells faintly of mildew, perfume, and last winter's smoke. These curtains aren't decoration. They're insulation. They're the only thing standing between you and the icy drafts that leak in through every crack in the stonework. Your mattress is a lumpy construction of straw and feathers, unevenly stuffed and sagging slightly in the middle. It creaks when you shift. The sheets are linen, cold to the touch and a little rough. They were washed recently enough. You hope your pillow is flatter than it should be, but you've learned not to complain about that. Above you, wooden beams stretch across the ceiling, dark with age and coated in dust. A single iron chandelier dangles from the center unlit, forgotten overnight. The walls are bare stone, rough and unpainted. There are no portraits, no photographs, just a few ancient tapestries with fading images of saints, hunting scenes, or family crests that once held political meaning. Somewhere in the corner, near the hearth, you hear the faint scratching of a mouse, or maybe a rat rooting through the rushes on the floor. The stone is too cold to walk on barefoot, so the chamber floor is layered in dried reeds and herbs, changed once every few weeks. Maybe your room smells of centuries, damp stone, dust, old wool, the lingering tang of the fire that burned low through the night in your small carved hearth. It went out hours ago, and now it's just blackened logs and ash. Beside the hearth, a servant girl is kneeling quietly, trying not to wake you as she lays fresh logs and coaxes the embers back to life. She's been up since before the sun rose. She never speaks to you, unless spoken to. You are royalty, after all. To your right, set atop a carved oak chest, rests your silver-plated basin and ewer. No running water here, just cold well water poured carefully for your use. It's already begun to sweat condensation onto the wood. Beyond the edge of your bed curtain, the air is even colder. You can hear the wind moaning softly through the slits of the high, narrow window. The glass is cloudy if there is any at all. Many windows in your part of the castle are covered in oiled parchment or wooden shutters. You can't open them easily, and you wouldn't want to. You don't want to see how grey the sky is, or how damp the stone courtyard has become overnight. Outside, life is already beginning. Somewhere, hooves clatter on cobblestones. A scullery maid yells for someone to bring water from the cistern. A guard coughs as he patrols the outer wall, his armor clinking with every step. The sound of iron-shod boots on stairs echoes sharply down the corridor, followed by the low murmur of servants exchanging instructions in Latin-tinged whispers, and above it all the castle bell, tolling softly to signal morning prayers. Your day has begun. You sit up slowly, the bed creaking as you shift your weight. Your nightgown linen, scratchy and not quite warm enough, clings to your skin. It's embroidered along the collar with delicate threads that itched when it was new and still itch now. Your hair, unbrushed since last evening, lies tangled in soft waves over your shoulders. If you're lucky, your maid will warm the brush by the fire this morning before dragging it through your scalp. Your feet search blindly for the slippers at your bedside. They're made of cloth, padded with wool, and slightly damp. Always slightly damp. The floor rushes rustle as you step onto them, your breath forming pale clouds in the morning air. No heat, no radiators. Just a hearth that might warm the edge of your bed if it's tended diligently. There's a clatter outside your door. The maid has arrived with your breakfast tray. A small wooden platter of yesterday's bread, slightly stale, a slice of soft cheese, and a pewter goblet of watered-down wine. You're a princess, yes, but the kitchen still has to stretch its resources. The bread is dark and dense. The cheese is a bit sour. There is no sugar for your tea. There is no tea, just the wine, which smells faintly metallic and wakes your stomach in the worst way. You hear her knock once gently. Then the heavy wooden door creaks open. She curtsies without meeting your eyes, places the tray on the small table, then withdraws silently. She's not allowed to speak to you, not unless you ask a direct question, and certainly not about anything personal. You're alone again, except for the fire and the ever-present feeling of being watched, because you're not alone in this castle. Not really. Servants, stewards, guards, and handmaids drift in and out of your days like smoke. Every word you say, every sigh, every complaint, it can be overheard, repeated, reported. You are a princess. Your privacy is not your own. Your body is not your own. Even your dreams, if you were foolish enough to speak them aloud, could become someone else's business. As you eat your cold breakfast in silence, you glance toward the large wooden wardrobe across the room. Behind those carved doors hangs the day's clothing, layers of linen, wool, and silk, all carefully chosen by someone who isn't you. The fire finally crackles to life in the hearth. A small flame, orange and fragile. It throws flickering shadows onto the tapestry, and for a moment you imagine what it would be like to be just warm. Your chambermaids will arrive soon. They'll undress you, bathe you with a cloth, help you into your corset and undergarments, lace you up, pin your sleeves, braid your hair, and make you presentable, not beautiful. That's not the goal. Presentable, because you are not a girl anymore. You are a daughter of kings, a piece on the board, a bride to be, and the court is always watching. Breakfast arrives in silence, carried by a girl younger than you, her head bowed low and her hands steady. The tray wobbles slightly as she sets it down, careful not to spill the wine or jostle the small wedge of cheese that sweats quietly on a pewter plate. She whispers a greeting, curtsies, and slips out of your chamber without a sound. And here it island, the first meal of your royal day. If you were expecting pancakes or poached eggs on toast, think again. Your breakfast, like your titles, is heavy and hard to digest. A chunk of brown bread, dense, coarse, unevenly baked, is still slightly warm from the oven. That's the luxury. It was probably baked in the lower kitchens before sunrise, down in the smoky, soot-slicked hearths where your cook has been scolding servants since the bells rang. The crust is tough, and the inside has an earthy tang to it. A mixture of rye, barley, and something else you don't ask about. Beside it, a lump of pale cheese. Soft at the edges, slightly waxy, and vaguely sour. It's probably sheep's milk stored in a waxed cloth and rubbed with ash to preserve it longer. You sniff it first, just in case. You've had food poisoning before. Nobility doesn't protect your stomach from curdled dairy. You eat slowly. There is no rush. There is nowhere to be but dressed. There is also no fork. You tear your bread by hand, dipping it occasionally into the watered-down wine. The wine is weak, diluted with well water, which may or may not have been boiled. It's not meant to taste good. It's meant to be safer than water, and mildly numbing. And no, there's no fruit, no butter, no honey. Unless your father recently hosted a feast and there were leftovers. You chew, methodically. A lady eats in silence. Loud chewing is improper, so is licking your fingers. So is sighing. So is wishing for something warm. You finish the bread, leave half the cheese, and drain the wine. That's it. That's all. A princess does not snack. Meals are a ritual. And this was just the prelude. Now, the more humiliating business of the morning begins. The maids return. 3 of them this time. All quiet, all efficient. They curtsy, greet you in low voices, and begin. They do not ask how you slept. They do not comment on your appearance. They are trained to be polite shadows watching you disrobe without acknowledging it. You are not allowed to bathe in privacy. Privacy is a luxury that only death affords. First, the cloth bath. There is a large basin near the fire, steaming slightly. Into it they pour warm water heated downstairs and carried up in heavy copper pitchers. It's already cooling fast in the stone chill. One girl mixes the water with dried herbs, lavender, sage, maybe rosemary, whatever could be gathered from the garden that hasn't frozen yet. The scent is more ceremonial than cleansing. Your nightgown is carefully removed, folded and replaced with a linen towel that covers only what propriety demands. You stand, still and chilly, while one maid begins wiping your arms and shoulders with a damp cloth. The water is warm at first, then cold, then unpleasant. They wipe you down in silence. Arms, neck, back, legs. You're not truly clean, just slightly less dusty. Your feet are scrubbed. Your face is rinsed with rose water, which stings if it gets too close to your eyes. Your teeth? Ah, yes. No toothbrush, no toothpaste, no mint. Instead, your maid hands you a small twig, a frayed birch or hazelwood stick, softened at the tip. You chew it gently to separate the fibers, then use it to scrub the surface of your teeth. There is no foaming lather, no minty tingle, just the soft scratch of bark against enamel, and the faint taste of yesterday's wine still clinging to your tongue. If you're lucky, someone in the castle has cloves. They're crushed and rubbed against the gums to reduce swelling or to cover the odor of tooth decay. You've heard of princesses who've lost all their teeth before 30. You plan to do better, or at least die young enough to avoid the problem. Your hair is next. It's long. It has to be. Short hair is for nuns, sick women, or widows in mourning. Your maid begins by brushing it with a wooden comb, wide-toothed and worn smooth from years of use. She starts from the bottom, working through the tangles gently at first, then with more force as she gets closer to the scalp. You wince. She pauses, then continues. It takes time. She parts your hair, braids it in sections, then binds the ends with strips of cloth. Later, she'll pin it under a veil or headdress, depending on the day's duties. The final step, perfume. But don't get excited. This isn't modern luxury. It's not bottled elegance from a French boutique. It's a crude mixture of oils and crushed herbs, maybe violets, maybe something like civet, which is made from the glands of a cat-like creature. It's musky, too strong, but the court finds it fashionable. She dabs it on your wrists, behind your ears, and at your throat. You are now presentable, not clean, never fully clean. The castle holds too much dust, too much rot, too many people wearing too many layers. But you are masked, you are refined, you are wrapped in layers of etiquette and smell. Your undergarments are laid out first, the linen chemise, then the stiffened stays that will be laced tight around your ribs. No, they don't crush your waist. Not exactly, but they do compress your breathing, reshape your posture, and remind you not to slouch. Then the petticoats, the heavy woolen skirt, the sleeves, the outer gown, fastenings at the wrist, clasps at the throat. It's still morning, and you're already exhausted. A princess's hygiene is not about feeling good, it's about appearing correct. If your hands are too rough, they'll whisper. If your hair is too dry, they'll speculate. If your teeth yellow, they'll murmur behind their veils and blame your mother's bloodline. Your body is political real estate. Your scent, your skin, your hair, your posture, all must be maintained, like a temple that no one worships in anymore, but everyone still judges. You sit at your vanity, face composed, hands folded in your lap. Outside your window, the castle is waking. Bells are ringing. Servants rush past. A page boy slips on the icy flagstones below. Your governess is coming. Your Latin lessons will begin soon. You'll be quizzed on genealogy, scolded for slouching, and corrected on your pronunciation of Aquitaine. But for now, you breathe. Installe perfume, out cold air. Another morning done. Your clothes are ready, laid out in neat layers by hands you never see, ironed with hot stones, scented with dried lavender, and stitched carefully by women who aren't allowed to wear anything nearly this fine themselves. But don't mistake them for comfortable. A medieval princess's wardrobe was less about fashion and more about architecture. Your first layer, The chemise, a simple ankle-length linen shift. It's the only piece that touches your bare skin, and depending on the quality of the cloth, it ranges from coarse burlap made softer by washing to slightly less aggressive sandpaper. Linen is breathable, sure, but there's no such thing as seamless in the Middle Ages. Every edge scratches, every seam pinches. You don't complain, you're not supposed to. Next come your stays. You don't call them a corset, not yet. That's a few centuries off, but the concept is the same. They're stiffened with reeds, or if you're lucky, whalebone. You hold your breath as your maid pulls the laces tighter. Not because you're vain, because it's expected. Your figure must reflect your family's standing. A high birth deserves a narrow waist, whether or not your ribs agree with the idea. Then come the petticoats, layers of wool or heavy linen to add volume, warmth, and dignity. They swish when you move, they collect dust like it's their job, and they never hang quite right unless you stand perfectly still, like a statue built to host diplomatic marriages. The overdress follows your gown, likely made of velvet or brocade, something rich and impossibly heavy. The sleeves alone could be a separate outfit. They're lined with fur squirrel, fox, or even ermine if your family has connections to the crown. It's gorgeous in candlelight and oppressive in sunlight. Every inch of fabric tells a story. How much your family can afford, which lands you represent, how obediently you follow court fashion. The neckline might be square or gently curved, depending on the fashion of the year, but you don't decide that. Trends travel from castle to castle with the speed of gossip and the urgency of politics. You're not a trendsetter. You're a mirror, polished and obedient. Accessories? Of course, you'll wear a girdle, a long belt of woven silk and metal thread that dangles from your waist. It's decorative. It's useless. It gets in the way every time you sit, and sometimes your siblings step on it just to be annoying. On your head, a veil, pinned with fine brass or silver clips, or a padded coif beneath a decorative crespin, a kind of hairnet made with golden thread. No matter how you slept, your hair must now lie flat, coiled, bound, and hidden beneath fabric. No loose hair, that's for young girls and scandalous poets. And shoes? Technically, yes. Though shoes is generous. You slip on soft leather slippers, pointed at the toes and lined with fur that's long since worn thin. They offer little in the way of protection from the cold floor, and none at all from mud, rats, or anything sharp. Luckily, you rarely go outside. You've been standing for 15 minutes, and already your spine aches from the weight of the gown, the tightness of the laces, the stiff collar pressing against your neck. You haven't even moved yet, and you're sweating, or freezing, or both. Because castles, they're not cozy. Let's talk about your home. From the outside, the castle looks majestic. Towers rise like stone fingers into the fog, walls thick enough to repel armies, gates so heavy they groan when opened. It's impressive, powerful, romantic if you're reading about it in a book. But from the inside, it's a refrigerated barn. Your chamber is on the second floor of the solar tower, away from the kitchens and nowhere near the fire-hearted Great Hall. The walls are solid stone, 2 feet thick in places. They were built to withstand siege engines, not winter, nor insulation, nor central heat, just whatever warmth your hearth can offer, whatever blankets you're allowed, and however many layers of wool your body can bear before movement becomes a negotiation. Every surface is cold. The walls, your chair, the iron frame of your bed. Even your brush feels like it came from a glacier. The floor, packed stone or uneven wood planks, covered in rushes that trap dust, rat droppings, and old perfume, like a medieval time capsule. The windows are narrow slits, arrow loops, really, originally meant for defense, not daydreaming. If you have glass, it's a small pane, warped and bubbled. Otherwise, it's oiled parchment stretched over the frame, letting in light but little warmth. The air leaks through every crack. In winter, you wake with frost on your lips. In summer, the air stagnates until the candles melt without burning. There's a fireplace, yes, but it's unreliable. The chimney clogs. The smoke doesn't always rise. Sometimes it curls back into the room and coats your tapestries in soot. If the wind shifts, the entire tower smells like burnt meat and wet wool. Speaking of smells, there's no plumbing, no drains, just chamber pots under the bed, emptied when a servant remembers. Sometimes into the moat, sometimes not. If you're lucky, someone burns lavender nearby. If not, your morning air carries hints of human waste, boiled cabbage, wet dog, and candle tallow. And privacy? That's a fairy tale. Servants come and go. Scribes knock uninvited. The steward might drop in to check on household accounts. You don't own a key. You don't control who sees you or when. Even your prayers might be overheard. There are no secret corners. Not for you. Your world is designed to be watched. Even at night, you're not alone. Your lady-in-waiting sleeps in the antechamber. Guards patrol outside. You're not just a person. You're a symbol. A display piece in your father's political cabinet. A body wrapped in velvet and formality. Stored carefully in a room where even the bedposts have ears. But worst of all, even after all this fabric, all these walls, you're still cold, not just physically, existentially. You're not allowed to run, or wander, or swim in the river. You're not expected to read beyond scripture and courtly verse. You don't own your time. You're on display, dressed like a duchess, sealed inside a castle with walls thicker than any comfort. You are elegance, you are duty, and you are exhausted. But your day is just beginning, so you're dressed. You've been brushed, laced, veiled, and scented. You're as close to prepared as a person can be while bound in stiff fabric and carrying the combined weight of lineage, politics, and 2 stone-floored hallways of expectation. Now what? Welcome to the labor of royal life. No, you won't be hauling bricks or digging trenches, but that doesn't mean your day isn't a slow, relentless form of performance labor. Because as a princess, your job isn't just to exist. Your job is to represent, to model dignity, piety, obedience, and just enough charm to appear graceful but never unserious. You start with education, not the fun kind. You don't get to study astronomy or medicine or maps. You're a noblewoman, and that means your curriculum is carefully curated. You're learning how to stitch Latin prayers onto linen, how to hold a psalter without creasing it, and how to speak 3 languages badly, but just well enough to smile and nod through a diplomatic feast. Your governess arrives, with her face like a chalkboard and voice like week-old barley. She sets out your wax tablet and ink-stained fingers and corrects your posture more often than your spelling. You practice penmanship, carefully looping each letter like it's a sacred relic, because a princess who writes sloppily is a scandal. Your handwriting will one day be displayed in letters read by bishops and kings. Each A is a duty, each P is a performance. After writing, you recite genealogy, psalms, saints' days. You memorize the names of ancestors who were beheaded, married off, or canonized, sometimes all 3. You learn poetry, but only the parts about virtue and sacrifice. No romance, no adventure, certainly no lusty nights or tragic love poems. Those are for troubadours and troublemakers. And while your lessons are underway, let's talk about what you're not doing. You're not sitting, not really. Your chair has no cushion. The back is straight. You're meant to perch, not sprawl. Slouching is considered a gateway to moral decay. You're not eating. The next meal won't arrive for hours. and you'll be lucky if it's warm by the time it does. And if you so much as nibble a sugared fig before the appointed hour, a servant will notice. Someone always notices you're not relaxing. There is no such word in your vocabulary, not one you're allowed to use. Instead, you rehearse. You practice bowing, rising, curtsying, and entering a room with precision. You rehearse polite conversation, how to deflect unwanted questions, how to nod without appearing simple, how to laugh without opening your mouth too wide. Because court life isn't just about speaking, it's about not slipping, not saying too much, not standing too tall, not offending the wrong cousin of the wrong bishop's second wife. You break from your lessons briefly for needlework, the medieval equivalent of unpaid domestic branding. You sit with your embroidery hoop, stitching delicate flowers or saints or heraldic animals into pillow covers and wall hangings. Your fingers cramp. The thread tangles, and every time you prick your finger, you remember the story of the Virgin Martyr who bled onto her embroidery and became a saint. You are not feeling very saintly. Now you move to the solar, a private family room warmed by sunlight. If the weather allows, it's one of the few rooms in the castle designed for comfort, though comfort here is defined by less mildew than the stairwell. Here you may be expected to supervise younger siblings, help instruct a new maid, or entertain visiting noblewomen with conversations so polite it verges on unconsciousness. A visiting baroness compliments your embroidery. You compliment her shoes. You both pretend to care. Meanwhile, you're also performing one of the most invisible but exhausting forms of labor a medieval princess can endure. Remaining desirable. Even if you're not yet betrothed, your value is being measured quietly, constantly, and across every corridor in the castle. Are you pale enough? Sunburn is peasant behavior. Are your fingers soft? Calluses signal work. Unacceptable. Is your waist narrow? Good. Just don't faint. Do you speak with poise? Do you cross your ankles? Do you tilt your head when men talk? Just slightly. Just enough to seem attentive, but not assertive. This is not vanity. It's currency. Your face, your body, your manners all are chips in the great game of dynastic negotiation. Somewhere in a drafty council chamber, a priest is already scribbling notes about which noble house you might be married into by age 15. And whether you like cheese is entirely irrelevant. If your father is particularly ambitious, he may parade you in front of guests during feasts, letting them admire your virtues while you smile, until your jaw cramps and you're tasting blood in your molars. But hey, you're a princess, right? What about leisure? You're allowed maybe a lute lesson. You pluck the same 5 notes you've been plucking for the past 3 years, while your tutor corrects your hand position for the 1000th time. Maybe a walk in the courtyard supervised. Of course, escorted by a lady in waiting whose job is to make sure you don't step in anything, speak to anyone inappropriate, or appear too joyous. Joy, after all, can be interpreted as rebellion. Perhaps you play a game of chess or 9 men's Morris, but only if your opponent is of equal rank, and only if you remember to lose, graciously, at the right moment. And then there's charitable labor, which is to say, the carefully staged display of piety and generosity. You might be asked to sew garments for the poor, which will never fit. You might distribute bread to villagers, as long as you don't touch them. You might visit the chapel to pray for sick children you'll never meet, all while being observed, because a good princess doesn't just do good. She's seen being good. The truth is, your life is labor, not the kind that breaks the back, the kind that breaks the will slowly, sweetly, with a constant, glittering smile. You are the performance, the product, the promise, and every blink, breath, and breathless moment is part of the act. And if you think that sounds exhausting, congratulations. You're halfway through the day. The chapel bell tolls. You pause whatever you're doing, needlework, recitation, walking silently through the garden path under close supervision, and you bow your head. Not because you're devout, not necessarily, but because belief isn't optional. It's built into your schedule. You are a medieval princess, and your life is not your own. It belongs to God and to the church that speaks on His behalf. Religion is not a part of your life. It is your life. You begin and end your day with prayer. Whether whispered into your pillow or read aloud in the chapel, it marks every moment like punctuation. You're taught to cross yourself upon waking, to give thanks before each bite of food, and to examine your conscience before you dare close your eyes at night. You recite the Paternoster, the Ave Maria, and the Credo in Unum Deum more often than you speak to your own siblings. Your Latin may be stiff, but your delivery is reverent, or at least it must appear so, because everyone is watching. Your piety is part of your value. A good princess is holy, not necessarily joyful, not necessarily kind, but obedient, modest, and outwardly devout. Your soul is just one more dowry item to be judged, weighed, and paraded. The castle has its own chapel, of course. A private one, small, candlelit, filled with incense so thick it clings to your hair and sleeves for hours. The air always smells like wax, wood smoke, and damp stone. There are no pews, just carved wooden benches. You kneel on worn cushions, your knees aching from both the pressure and the posture. The priest arrives, eyes always lowered. He speaks of sin, of discipline, of duty. He does not smile. Mass is daily. Confession is weekly. Sometimes more if you've been observed sighing too loudly or laughing at an inappropriate joke during supper. Your guilt is not private. It's often anticipated before you even feel it. You confess everything, small things mostly. Impatience, pride, impure thoughts, lapses in focus during scripture reading, perhaps the silent wish that your chambermaid would drop the brush in the fire, or that your younger sister would forget her lessons just once. The priest listens. Sometimes he questions. Sometimes his questions are too specific. He reminds you that Eve fell for curiosity. That vanity is the devil's mirror. That God sees everything, especially thoughts you haven't yet dared to think. Then he assigns your penance. 3 paternosters, 5 Hail Marys, and no talking during supper. You nod, you accept, you are forgiven until the next time. But religion is not just prayer and guilt. It's also fear. You were raised with tales of saints and martyrs, yes, but also demons, witches, and wrath. The devil is real. His tricks are subtle. He hides in desire, in ambition, in mirrors, in dreams, in laughter that lasts too long. And if you are not careful, he will find his way into your soul through the smallest crack, like forgetting to say grace or enjoying the scent of your own perfume. You are taught to fear hell not as a metaphor, but as a very literal place, a furnace of eternal fire, a pit full of shrieking, cursed souls and demonic creatures who take delight in your suffering. And all it takes to get there is a lie, a kiss, a moment of doubt. And women, well, we fall faster. You've heard it all before, that women are weaker vessels, more emotional, more easily tempted, that your body, just by existing, is a source of danger for yourself and for others. Why do you cover your hair in church? Because it's considered too enticing. Why must your clothing be modest and heavy? Because your skin might invite sin just by breathing. Even your voice is risky if raised too loud. So, you internalize. You lower your gaze. You practice the spiritual discipline of silence. But religion isn't just rules, it's rituals. And they shape everything. You fast. Often, there are over 180 fasting days in the liturgical calendar: Advent, Lent, Ember Days, and Vigil feasts. Meat is forbidden. Sometimes, dairy and eggs too. You eat bread, pottage, bitter greens, watered wine. You don't complain. That's pride. You observe feast days with feigned joy. You light candles to saints. You kneel before relics. You touch the hem of a monk's robe and hope he blesses your childbearing hips when the time comes. You believe in miracles too, or at least you're supposed to. You've been told stories of saints who walked on water, wept blood, levitated during prayer. You've heard of weeping statues, of holy springs that cure blindness, of children born without pain to mothers who prayed hard enough. Sometimes you want to believe, sometimes you're just tired, and when you can't manage to muster divine love, you cling to superstition instead. You touch wood, you hang sprigs of rosemary by your window to keep out evil spirits. You sprinkle salt in the corners of your chamber to ward off nightmares. You never say certain words aloud after dark. You know to avoid the evil eye. You've seen charms, rings, talismans, dried animal bones, tied with red string hidden in the hems of servants' dresses. You pretend not to see them, because magic is forbidden. Yes, but when your baby sister runs a fever in the middle of the night, and the physician is days away, and the priest says it's divine punishment, sometimes the cook's whispered spell feels more comforting than scripture. You are not allowed to believe in both, but everyone does. You're not supposed to believe that sneezing too many times in a row is a bad omen, or that dreams of wolves mean betrayal, or that if you wake and your candle has blown out, it means death is coming for someone in your household. But you do, and in the quiet hours, when the wind howls through the cracks in the window frame, and the castle seems more shadow than stone, and the crucifix above your bed looks a little too heavy, a little too stern, you wonder if maybe God has forgotten you, or maybe he never liked princesses to begin with. You're not allowed to say these thoughts out loud, but they sit in the corners of your room. They wait behind the altar. They drift between the pages of your prayer book, right beside the ribbon marking the psalm about obedience. You close your eyes, you fold your hands, and you try very hard to believe, because in your world, belief is survival, and doubt, well, doubt is dangerous. It's midday now. The castle echoes with the muffled clatter of kitchen chaos far below the chopping of meat, the scrape of pots, the frustrated barking of the cook trying to stretch one chicken into 12 servings. You hear it faintly, like distant thunder filtered through stone. Dinner, what you might call lunch, today is approaching. This is your main meal of the day, the only one where you might sit in relative luxury, served on polished pewter or even silver, surrounded by tapestries, candles, and judgment. Because nothing in a medieval court is ever just a meal. This is theatre. The food, however, is not always the star of the show. As a princess, you are seated near the top of the long trestle table, flanked by other nobles and relatives you either barely know or know too well. The table is covered in a white linen cloth that's been reused several times already this week. It still has stains from yesterday's venison pie and the unfortunate eel incident before that. There is no plate with your name on it. Instead, you and your neighbour share a trench, a slab of stale hard bread used as a plate. After the meal, this bread is either tossed to the poor or fed to the dogs. If it's very stale, it might just be reused again. Food safety is a myth wrapped in meat pie and what's on the menu. If your castle is wealthy and your lands fruitful, you might get roasted capon chicken's older, tougher cousin stewed in wine and seasoned with spices brought at great cost from the east. Not because they taste good, but because they impress guests. There's often a pottage, a sort of thick porridge or stew boiled until it forgets what it used to be. Maybe there's bread, not soft, crusty loaves, flat, dense rounds full of bran and stones that crack your teeth if you bite too quickly. Vegetables are boiled into surrender. Carrots, leeks, onions, if they're not grey by the time they reach your table, the cook has failed. And forget fresh salads. Raw greens are suspicious, associated with peasantry, or, worse, medicine. Sometimes the cook gets creative. A meat pie shaped like a bird. A fish disguised as a pig. Coloured jellies made from bone broth and optimism. They're all carefully arranged, garnished, and paraded out for the guests to gasp at before being whisked away again, only partly edible. Everything is heavily salted, not for taste, but for preservation. Salt hides the flavour of meat that's aged a little too long in a warm pantry. You chew carefully. You've learned to recognise the taste of meat that might argue back later. And the drinks? Everyone drinks. Water is dangerous, unless it's from a trusted well and recently boiled, which it rarely islands. Instead, you sip small ale, a weak fermented barley brew low in alcohol and safer than water. Or wine, if you're lucky, but not the crisp, chilled vintage of modern dreams. This is warm, cloudy, often sour wine, sometimes mixed with spices to mask the flavour and poured from a jug that hasn't been properly cleaned since Pentecost. You drink from a shared goblet. Not ideal. You hope the person before you didn't have a loose tooth or the plague. There are no forks. Not really. You eat with your fingers, delicately, trained to break apart bread and pull at meat without appearing greedy or getting grease on your embroidered cuffs. A knife is allowed yours, brought from your room, carefully polished and displayed at your side like jewellery. Napkins? No. That's what the tablecloth is for. You don't eat until your father does. And once he stops, so do you. And yet, for all its flaws, there is something regal about it. The music, softly played in the corner, the flicker of candlelight on polished goblets, the illusion of warmth, the stories being told by men with stained lips and loud voices. You are not expected to speak much during the meal. You listen. You smile at the correct moments. You nod when a bard recites poetry that rhymes only sometimes. You do not interrupt. You do not yawn. You do not frown at the pickled fish. After the meal, things lighten for others. Anyway, entertainment begin. If guests are visiting, the castle becomes a stage. There may be minstrels singing songs about your ancestors' heroism, whether true or invented. Lutes and harps fill the hall with music, though the tuning is always questionable and the volume unpredictable. Jesters arrive next. They wear bells and foolish grins, but you know better. Jesters see everything. They're allowed to speak truths no one else dares. Their jokes are carefully crafted darts, aimed at egos too proud to duck. One wrong laugh, and you could be accused of mocking someone above your station. There may be dancing, though not the sweeping ballrooms of fairy tales. These are line dances, circle dances, structured, repetitive, dictated by tradition. You step where you're told, turn when the music commands, and always, always watch your sleeves. One torn hem, and the whispers begin. And if there's no entertainment, there's always gossip. The castle breathes on rumour. Whispers pass faster than fire. Who's been seen slipping into whose chamber? Who fainted during confession? Whose linen was seen being washed with extra lye, a sure sign of secret bleeding or forbidden sin? And always, always, the question of marriage. You're reminded of it constantly. Which nobleman's son is visiting? Which cousin of the Duke is newly widowed? Which alliance your father might be considering? Who saw you glance too long at the squire pouring the wine? You're not allowed to flirt, but you are expected to attract. So you sit straighter, you smile more carefully, you laugh a little louder at the right moment. And when your father's steward mentions the arrival of a young lord from the coast, You feel 20 eyes turn toward you. Your wine tastes a little more sour after that. And then, before the day fades too far, the bells toll again. Evening prayers. The party ends. The candles dim. The minstrels stop tuning their lutes. Your chambermaid appears in the corridor with your cloak and a face full of subtle reminders. You rise. Your stomach is full but not satisfied. Your mind is heavy but not yet at rest. Because tonight, like every night, the castle will grow quiet, but never safe. And soon the torches will burn low, and your candle will sputter, and the dark corners of the stone corridors will begin to whisper again, but not yet. There's still a little light left. You wake in the middle of the night. The fire's gone out. The air is freezing. Your breath ghosts in the dark like a spirit too tired to haunt anything. And there's a sound. Faint, ragged. Someone coughing, not a polite, courtly cough. Not a cleared throat or a whisper of discomfort. This is deep, wet, pulled from the chest like something's trying to claw its way out. It's coming from the chamber next door, your sister's room. You pull the bed curtains tighter, as if wool and velvet could protect you from breath and bone. Because in the Middle Ages, sickness isn't a season, it's a sentence, and castles, with their damp corners and crowded servants and questionable air, are not fortresses against disease. They are incubators. Your father may rule with iron and parchment, but he cannot command a fever to leave. Your mother may pray with tears in her eyes, but no saint has ever stopped the plague once it crosses the drawbridge. You've seen it before. It begins with fatigue, a flushed face, a limp walk, then the heat, the sweating, the fevered muttering of a voice that once recited psalms and now mumbles nonsense. And then the worst part, the silence, the stillness, the bed that gets stripped without ceremony, and the window that stays open long after the body is gone. You don't talk about it, because if you name it, it might recognize you. Medicine in your world is not based on germs or cells. It's based on balance, the four humours: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. A good physician doesn't ask about symptoms. He asks about your complexion, your diet, your dreams. He checks the colour of your urine in a glass vial. He listens to your pulse with fingers and faith. He might smell your breath and declare you melancholic. Then comes the treatment. If you're lucky, herbs, syrups, broths, poultices. If you're not, bloodletting. A shallow slice in the arm. A leech behind the ear. A silver bowl collecting your vitality. All in the name of restoring balance. Does it help? Sometimes. Does it kill? Also sometimes. But questioning the physician is unthinkable. His knowledge comes from Galen, from Hippocrates, from dusty texts copied in monastic script. If you die, it's not because he failed. It's because God willed it. You've also got folk healers, midwives, herb women, old widows with strange knowledge passed down through whisper and touch. They brew teas from sage, feverfew, and yarrow. They mutter prayers while crushing dried rose hips into paste. They aren't welcome at court, but when the doctor fails, they get called anyway. Quietly. At night, through the servants' entrance, their medicine smells like rot and hope. And you? What do you do when someone falls ill? You pray. You light candles at the family altar. You send word to the chapel to have a mass said for their soul, just in case. And you wait. And while you wait, you worry. Because illness is not rare. It is constant. A feature of life, not an interruption. You've known people who died of a tooth infection that spread to the jaw, a cut on the leg that festered beneath layers of wool, a childbirth gone just slightly too long, a fever that lasted 2 days, and then silence. You've seen the fear in people's eyes when someone sneezes during supper. You've watched nobles leave the table early, whispering about plague, even when it's only a cold. You've heard of entire households locked behind their gates, only to have their doors broken down by men in masks, checking for survivors. And you've heard the word that brings true terror: quarantine. It doesn't mean medicine. It means abandonment. It means your family seals itself off. It means no one comes in or out. It means food is left at the gate, untouched, and you're told to ring a bell if anyone's still alive inside. And then, of course, there are the diseases you're taught to expect. Smallpox, with its blistering sores and the sound of weeping behind every door it enters. The sweating sickness, sudden, violent, and deadly, within a day. The great pox, a new curse from abroad, whispered about in shameful tones, its sores hidden beneath lace and powdered perfumes. And always, always the fear of plague. You know the sign. You know to check for black spots on the skin. You know that the appearance of a plague cart in town means someone will be burning their linens by sunset. And yet for all this fear, what protection do you have? A prayer, a ring blessed by a bishop, a pouch of herbs tied to your belt, rosemary, sage, and lavender, to cleanse the air. You've seen doctors wear bird-like masks, filled with sweet-smelling herbs to ward off the miasma. You wonder if they even believe it works. You don't. But it's better than nothing. And then, even beyond illness, there is injury. Castles are dangerous. Stairs are uneven. Walls are sharp. Horses panic. Servants carry knives. There are no safety rails. No sterile bandages. No antiseptic. A stubbed toe can fester. A broken arm can end your embroidery career. A fall from the battlements can end everything. You've heard of noble women who slipped in the snow and never woke again. Of children who played too close to the hearth. Of servants who bled to death from kitchen accidents, while prayers were muttered and towels pressed against arteries no one could find. There is no concept of being rushed to the hospital. There is no hospital, only prayer, poultices, and waiting. And even when you survive, you carry the mark, a limp, a scar, a lost tooth, a lost child. Because death is not always sudden here. Sometimes it's slow. Sometimes it sits beside you while you eat, unnoticed, until the spoon trembles. Sometimes it hides in your own blood, waiting for a reason to run. You've learned to move carefully, to watch for coughs, to notice fevers, to sleep with one eye half open. You are royalty, but you are not immune. And every illness that visits your household reminds you there is no cure for fate. Only prayer, only ritual, only silence. And tonight, you light a candle at your bedside, not for light, but for protection. You are a daughter, a sister, soon, perhaps, a wife, but always, always a woman in a world where that word is both sacred and small. In the eyes of the court, women are the keepers of grace, the vessels of lineage, the architects of virtue. And yet, you own nothing, not even your own name once you marry. You are essential and entirely controlled. In a medieval castle, the roles of women are as rigid as the stone walls themselves. Let's start with your mother, the lady of the castle. To outsiders, she is serene, regal, cloaked in fine wool, crowned in modest veils, walking with grace beside your father during Mass, never raising her voice beyond what's considered holy. But you know better. You've watched her run the castle like a battlefield. She manages everything behind closed doors: staff, stores, ledgers, clothing, food supplies, dowry arrangements, feast planning, discipline. She is both the general and the accountant. She knows which servants are stealing flour and which daughter of which noble house is about to cause a scandal. And she does it all without thanks. No one claps for her when the linens are restocked and the bread comes out golden. She simply nods and continues. A queen without a crown, a ruler without power. Her throne is a writing desk. Her scepter is a schedule, and she is tired. You see it in her hands, always moving. You see it in her face, never resting. She is the future you are walking toward, whether you like it or not. And then there's younger you, the children of the castle, the ones with bright eyes, loud voices, and bruised shins. But childhood here is not long. A noble child is weaned young, taught obedience before joy, dressed in stiff wool by age 3, sent to other households by 7, maybe 8, to serve as a page or lady in waiting. Not for fun, for training, for politics. Your younger siblings cling to toys carved from wood, dolls stuffed with straw, little painted animals made by the carpenter when no one is looking. But already the boys are practicing swordplay with blunted sticks. The girls are learning to stitch. There are no lullabies after 6. No lullabies at all, if your nurse was replaced by a stricter one. Bedtime comes with prayers and the smell of damp blankets, not stories and kisses. And above all, the worst fact of medieval childhood. Most don't survive it, you don't speak of it, but you remember the names of those who didn't reach their 5th birthday. You remember the ones who coughed too long, who tripped on the stairs, who drank from the wrong bucket, who burned their hands and never healed. No one says they died. They say God called them, as if heaven had nothing better to do than collect babies from drafty castles. But even those who survive are rarely children in the way you'd imagine. By 12, a girl is expected to speak modestly, kneel properly, and discuss marriage prospects. By 14, she may be Wednesday. By 15, pregnant. If she's not, people start whispering. And you, a princess, are not exempt from this. Your marriage isn't just expected, it's designed. You are a treaty with eyes, a contract in silk, a womb with a last name. You don't choose your husband. He is chosen for you. Maybe when you're 13, maybe when you're 10. The actual wedding might wait until you're older, 15, 16, but your fate is decided long before that. When the match is made, the dowry becomes the obsession. Gold, land, titles, livestock, promises. Your value is counted and recorded by scribes who don't even know your favorite color. Your father will smile, your mother will nod, you will curtsy. And in your private chambers, you will stare at the tapestry on the wall and wonder what your future husband smells like. You hope it's not onions and sweat, but it probably island. And once you're married, your role becomes even narrower. You are expected to be obedient, quiet, fertile, hospitable. You are to produce heirs, but not complain about childbirth. You are to raise children, but not raise your voice. You are to manage a household without ever appearing to manage anything at all. If you miscarry, you'll be pitied, but also quietly blamed. If your husband strays, you must be more patient. If he dies, you must wear black for a year, speak little, and then prepare to marry again. And childbirth? It's not a private moment. It's a courtroom. Your chamber will fill with women midwives, attendants, relatives, some praying, some shouting instructions, some gossiping while you scream into a wooden stick. There's no anesthesia, just linen to bite and God to beg. If you survive, you are celebrated. If the baby survives, even more so. If neither of you survives, well, there's already a candle lit in the chapel. Women in your world carry the line forward, but their own names rarely make it into the records. Your mother's mother's mother lived and died and bled for this castle, and you only know her name because it's embroidered into a kneeler in the chapel corner. And then there are the servant women, the ones who work while you sleep, who sew your gowns, who hold the wash basin, who risk punishment if your soap runs out. They have children too if they're allowed to keep them. They marry when permitted, or not at all. They age fast. Their fingers grow crooked from years of scrubbing, stitching, carrying. Their eyes dull from candlelight, and sleep lost to other people's babies. And still, they smile at you. Still, they bow, because that's how the castle works. From the highest tower to the lowest kitchen, everything runs on the silent labor of women. Unseen, underpaid, unthanked. And when one of them disappears, no one asks too many questions. Maybe she ran, maybe she died, maybe she just stopped being useful. And you sit by the window, you listen to the bells, you stroke your embroidery with fingers that ache only slightly. You think of your mother, you think of your future daughters, and you wonder what kind of woman you're being shaped into. Soft, strong, silenced, sacred, all of them maybe. Because in a medieval castle, to be a woman is to be woven into the walls themselves, strong, silent, necessary, and always one bad marriage away from being forgotten. The sun has passed its highest point now, drifting behind the towers in the west, casting long, warped shadows down the castle corridors. The warmth, such as it was, is already fading. You feel the chill settle in again, the kind that seeps through velvet and bone alike. The afternoon in a medieval castle is deceptively quiet. There are no alarms, no sirens, no loud declarations of danger. But you've lived here long enough to know this is when things happen, because behind every embroidered sleeve and courteous nod lies a tangled web of power, suspicion, and quiet cruelty. And navigating it? That's work. You've finished your meal, your embroidery is folded and stashed, you've been paraded before a few visitors and complimented on your posture. And now, as the castle moves into its slower hours, you brace yourself for what might unfold, because in the Middle Ages, conflict doesn't always come with swords. Sometimes it comes with a single word, said too loudly, or too softly, or in the wrong corridor. Let's start in the solar, where the ladies gather. This should be a peaceful room, a place for warmth, light, reading, sewing, and company. But today, it's tense. Lady Elaine has arrived from the northern keep. Her gown is too fine for her station. Her veil is trimmed with imported silk from the east, and she's been smiling just a little too sweetly at the steward's son, who unfortunately is your father's favoured messenger. It's not your concern, technically, but Lady Elaine is only 2 years older than you, and the glances she casts in your direction are not friendly. Later, during conversation, she brings up an incident from 2 winters ago, your illness, the one that nearly took you. She wonders aloud if it changed your temperament, made you more quiet than is natural. The other women chuckle politely. You smile, but your stomach tightens. You know what she's doing. Insult wrapped in concern. Gossip disguised as observation. A single line like that, especially if repeated, could sow doubt. Doubt about your readiness for marriage, your mental state, your suitability as the future lady of a household. And in your world, where perception is everything, doubt is poison. You excuse yourself politely, retreat to the gallery, and find solace briefly in the rhythm of your own footsteps on cold stone. But even here, you're not alone. 2 pages race by, muttering about a fight in the lower bailey. One of the guards has been caught drunk and asleep at his post. There will be consequences, punishments, because discipline here is not an abstract concept. It is enforced physically. You know what happens when servants disobey. You've seen the stock, the whippings, the quiet dismissals that are never explained. You've walked past the armory and seen a young man barely older than you, scrubbing the floors with blood still crusted on his cheek. He'd mouthed off to the steward once. Punishment here is not a matter of fairness. It's a matter of example. Your father rules with order, and order, in a medieval castle, often wears the face of fear. Even among the nobles, Justice Island, flexible. A cousin who lies about a broken betrothal, he's scolded in private. A chambermaid who drops a platter of food during a feast, she's whipped. The difference is birth, not behavior. And you, trapped somewhere between privilege and powerlessness, are expected to witness all of it without flinching. Because emotion, too, is political. Back in the main hall, tensions brew not just between noble houses, but within families themselves. Your brother is arguing again with your father. It's not loud, not yet, but the tone is familiar. The clipped words, the way their eyes don't meet. Your brother believes he should be sent south to manage the river fort. Your father insists he remain here. Too young, he says, too reckless, too much like his mother. And now your mother is stiffening in her chair because the insult, like most in this castle, was meant to wound more than one person. You look down at your hands. You remember the last time voices were raised in the great hall. It ended with shattered goblets, a wounded servant, and 3 weeks of silence between your parents. But today, nothing breaks, only silence, which is worse in a way, because you know how silence settles like dust. It hides in corners, it clings to tapestries, it listens at doors. The guards still bow when your brother walks by, but their eyes shift. The servants still serve your father's table, but their backs are straighter. Everyone is waiting, because in a medieval castle, power changes hands, not with elections, but with alliances. And every disagreement is a prelude. The afternoon then becomes a dance, a subtle, invisible one. You check your own posture. You choose your words carefully when the steward's wife asks how your embroidery is progressing. You laugh at a passing joke, but only with your eyes. You don't mention the argument you overheard. Not to anyone, not even your maid, because you know how fast words travel. You once whispered a complaint about the way the cook seasons the pottage. The next morning, your plate was extra salty, and the cook's assistant looked a little too pleased. You never mentioned the food again. It's not just people you have to be wary of. Even the walls here carry grudges. Every family crest on the tapestries has a history of land feuds, broken oaths, or ill-fated marriages. Every corridor has a corner where someone once whispered betrayal into someone else's ear, and in the afternoon stillness, these histories feel close, like old arguments echoing through stone. Sometimes the conflicts burst into the open. A knight accused of cheating at cards, a scuffle between stable hands that turns into a brawl, a steward caught taking extra coin from the food budget. But most of the time, it's quieter, more dangerous. Someone doesn't get invited to a feast. A letter gets lost. A betrothal is delayed. A smile is just a bit too sharp. And the longer you live in the castle, the more you understand. Survival isn't just about knowing how to sew. It's about knowing who to smile at, when to look away, what not to say. You spend the rest of your afternoon in the small library, pretending to read a copy of Boethius while your mind spins with half-finished conversations and half-felt threats. You don't look out the window. You don't look at your reflection in the glass. You just breathe, slow, even. Because if you're lucky, today will end without incident. And if you're not, you'll know by nightfall. The sky turns the color of bruised parchment as the sun disappears behind the western wall. Inside the castle, everything changes. Nightfall doesn't just signal the end of the day. It signals risk. Because unlike today, filled with structure, scrutiny, and social theatre, night in a medieval castle is an hour ruled by instinct, fear, and the limits of your own imagination. Your maid arrives with a candle, the flame already guttering from the breeze in the corridor. She says little. She draws your bed curtains closed, not for privacy, but for warmth. She stokes the hearth as best she can, but the firewood is damp. It hisses, it spits, and then it sulks into smolder. She leaves your nightgown folded at the foot of the bed. You'll dress alone, because no one wants to linger too long in someone else's chamber after dark. There are rules for night, unspoken, unwritten, but everyone knows them. Don't wander. Don't open doors you didn't close. Don't speak too loudly. And above all, don't trust a knock that comes without a name. Because when the torches along the hallways go out, when the guards begin their rounds with only oil lamps and half-drawn swords, anything feels possible. The castle is different at night. Not just quiet, empty. The noise of daily life, boots, clatter, voices, bells all fades. What's left is the creak of timber, the groan of settling stone, and the distant flutter of bats in the upper rafters. You hear footsteps in the corridor. They pass your door slowly, purposefully. Not a rush, not an emergency, just the sound of someone moving through the dark, without speaking. You don't know who it island, and you don't ask. Because the truth is, night belongs to the dangerous and the desperate, the drunk, the angry, the hungry, the sick. By day, the castle is policed by manners, by duty. At night, it's policed by nothing but the strength of your door latch. And some doors don't have latches. In the lower halls, where servants sleep in groups, pressed together for warmth and safety, even whispers carry a cough, a sob, a rustle of straw. Somewhere, someone shouts once, and then goes silent. No one investigates, because no one wants to know. Your world is not built for protection, it's built for order. And order is enforced only as far as the torches can see. There's always fear of fire. The castle is stone, yes, but its roof is not. The rafters are oak. The floors, where they're not packed earth or slate, are wood. The bedding, wool, straw, linen. A single overturned candle could mean catastrophe. There are no fire brigades, no water mains, no alarms, just servants with buckets and shouting. So every night before bed, someone checks the torches, the hearths, the lamp, and still you dream about fire, the glow under the door, the heat on your cheeks, the screams in the stairwell. And then there's the other fear, the one you don't say out loud, the one that wraps itself around your chest when the moon is high, the fear of death. Not the slow, ceremonial death of old age, the sudden one, the quiet one, the one that comes in the dark. You've seen it happen. A nobleman who retired to bed after a feast and was found cold by morning, his eyes open. A scullery maid who fell down the cellar steps and broke her neck. A child who stopped breathing and no one noticed until sunrise. You felt death pass by your own door, and you know, it doesn't always knock. Sometimes it just slips in, like a draft. There's a reason the chapel candles burn all night. There's a reason you wear a small cross on a ribbon under your gown. There's a reason you never sleep with your feet uncovered. Because superstition isn't quaint here, it's comfort, protection. You touch the crucifix before bed. You whisper the prayer to Saint Barbara, patroness against sudden death. You check the lock twice. You light a second candle, just in case. Your maid warned you once, years ago, not to sleep with a mirror facing your bed. She said the soul can mistake it for a door and wander out. You turned the mirror to face the wall. You never turned it back. Outside your window, the night noises rise. The croak of frogs in the moat, the occasional bark of a hound on the outer wall, the wind through the tower vent. Every sound is sharper now, closer, and every shadow looks like a shape that wasn't there before. You try not to imagine the castle ghosts, but everyone has a story. A woman who fell from the tower, chasing her lover. A knight who died with an arrow in his throat, still grasping the battlements. A child lost in the pantry during a siege, whose footsteps can still be heard near the spice rack. You tell yourself they're just stories, but you leave your shoes facing the door anyway, just in case one of them comes looking for something. And you lie down. You pull the blankets up to your chin. The fire in the hearth has gone out completely. Your candle flickers low. Your heart beats a little too fast, because night is not peaceful in a medieval castle. It is full of things left unfinished. Arguments, fever, regret, Rats. The kinds of dangers you can't name, the kinds you can't stop. You close your eyes, and you feel the stone of the castle pressing down from all sides. The weight of history, the pressure of duty, the cold fingers of stories that never truly end. You are safe. Mostly. For now, the fire has gone cold. The hallways are silent now. The castle sleeps not peacefully, but in that uneasy stillness that only ancient buildings know, as though the walls themselves are holding their breath, waiting for the next footstep, the next secret, the next life, to begin or end within them. But your day is done, and you, princess, daughter, symbol, survivor, can finally lay your head down, not on silk, not on goose feather, but on a pillow that's just soft enough not to bruise your ear. Your chamber is dark, except for the last flicker of a tallow candle on the stone sill. You can smell it, the wax, the smoke, the faint undertone of something burned long ago that never fully left. You breathe in, slowly, carefully. The laces of your gown have been loosened. The pressure across your ribs has softened. You're still wearing wool next to your skin, still sweating slightly, even in the cold. But now, finally, you're still. Your body is tired in a way that isn't quite physical. It's the weariness of restraint, of stillness, of performance. You've lived another day as a medieval princess. And that is no small feat. Because let's be honest, this life, it's not a fairy tale. It's not glass slippers and ballrooms and soft music playing under chandeliers. It's calloused fingers hiding in gloves. It's bleeding gums from too much vinegar rinse. It's hunger behind politeness, exhaustion behind posture, silence behind every diplomatic smile. It's fear of scandal, of failure, of being too bold or too quiet or too strange. Fear of never marrying, fear of marrying badly, fear of childbirth, of plague, of saying the wrong thing at dinner and never being invited back to the table. And still, you do it every day. Because in this world, you don't get to choose who you are. You are born to a name, a duty, a title, and you carry it gracefully if you can, quietly when you must. You become the anchor of alliances, the subject of ballads, the vessel of airs. You grow into the silhouette others expect of you, even when it doesn't quite fit. You learn to sit still when your heart wants to run. You learn to smile when your stomach turns. You learn to fold your thoughts as tightly as your embroidery. And in doing so, you survive. You carry your name forward. You keep the house in order. You write letters in a practiced hand, light candles in the chapel, and whisper secrets only your pillow will hear. You don't rebel, not loudly, but maybe, just maybe, in the way you walk a little slower down the stone stairs, in the way you take a longer breath than anyone expects, in the way you look at your reflection just once before turning away from the mirror. And now, as the moon rises and casts a pale line across your chamber floor, you feel sleep approaching. Not the deep, warm, dreamless kind, but the medieval kind. The kind where you half-wake every few hours, where you listen for footsteps, where you check for rats near the hearth, where you thank the saints that your stomach is quiet and your candle didn't die too early. But still, you rest, because you've earned it. You survived a full day in a castle where everyone sees you and no one knows you. You navigated politics, ritual, gossip, expectation. You were quiet when you needed to be, polite when it mattered, still when you were watched, and strong in the thousand tiny ways that no one will ever write a song about. You close your eyes now, and even in the dark, you can feel the cold weight of the walls around you, the history, the pressure, the stone. But there is peace in knowing that you don't live there, not really, not now, because this was just a dream, a slow waking dream. And as you lie there now in your real bed, with soft sheets, warm air, Running water, just steps away you feel it. Relief. Gratitude. Create wonder. The hum of electricity somewhere in the wall, the sound of a distant car, the knowledge that if you're hungry, there's food. If you're scared, there's light. If you're hurting, there's help. So tonight, as you drift off, remember, you don't have to wake up in that castle. You don't have to bow. You don't have to be watched. You don't have to carry a title or bleed in silence. You just have to rest. You just have to let go and let the centuries fall away like dust. You're safe. You're warm. And the night is finally, truly yours. Sleep well.